8 years ago we bought a clapped out old van that allowed us to travel the world after converting it to a camper with nothing but a corded hand drill and a jigsaw. We said goodbye to that van and bought a brand new, second-hand van that we are going to convert into our new home on wheels. In the previous video I installed insulation on the walls, fixed some holes in the floor and rust treated everything, added sound deadening
without any sound deadening,
and then did the battening for the flooring. In today's video we're going to crack on with the floor and hopefully get a solid surface to stand on from this point forward. The very first step wasn't actually doing the floor, it was doing some carpeting. Now here I'm using something called 4-way stretch, or otherwise known as auto carpet. The reason I'm making a start on this as opposed to the floor is because I want this to tuck under the floor. Throughout this whole project I'm going to do things that probably don't make any sense and they may not even be worthwhile. However, my theory is if anybody looks under the bed they'll see that, oh, that carpet tucks so neatly against that floor, when in fact it hasn't been cut, it's just tucked under. Auto carpet is a lifesaver for pillars like this, where there's a contours not only to the left and the right, but there's also contours that add depth. If I were to add the wall over the top of these pillars on both sides of the van, I'd lose about 4 inches width across the van, which when you're in such a tight space is considerable. It's as simple as cutting a piece roughly the right size, spraying some spray adhesive on the pillar itself, wait until it tacks up, and then applying the auto carpet on top. It's best to do this in sections because it's called 4-way stretch because it can literally stretch in all 4 directions. The idea is that you start somewhere, profile it to the straightest edge and then stretch and press and pull. This stuff is really hardy and you can drag it about all over the place to get a clean finish. I will issue a warning here, and this is from experience, trust me. Try not to overdo it with auto carpet. In my last van the entire roof was auto carpet as well as a lot of the panelling, and the thing with this stuff is it absorbs light. So when you're in a closed space and you've got all of this dark carpet, not only does it look dark, it actually sucks in all of the light and makes the van really difficult to see in, even if you've got a ton of LED lighting. After doing the right hand side of the van, it was time to shift over to the left hand side of the van. The pillar's slightly different on the left hand side because it does come up to the door. The good thing is that means you don't need to be neat about cutting it or hiding it, you just trim it down and put the door seal straight over the top. If I were to do this again, I wouldn't have gone all the way up to the ceiling. I didn't really know what my plan for the ceiling was at this time, but trust me, Ben from the future is telling you, if you're going to go along the same lines as me, you don't need to go all the way up to the top, especially on the right hand side one. What you can see here is the floor that I took out of the van. This was when it was ply lined and used as a works van, previously by a plumber and electrician, so it's seen some wear and tear. However, the template itself is pretty good in some areas and not so great in others. So what I'm doing here is marking the floor where these templates join. This is not one piece of ply. The idea being that I can take out all of these segments and lay them down on the top of some new sheets of ply. But there were some areas where I wasn't very happy, so I'm using some cardboard here to kind of profile a little bit closer to the columns. I don't want the big gaps around there because the chances are things will fall down there, and a screw rattling around against the side of your van is the most annoying thing ever. We haven't gone to all this effort of sound deadening to have things rolling around in voids. With that done, I can take the old ply and lay it over the top of some new ply. Now, these 3 segments of ply were cut in a bit of a weird way and they didn't really line up, so I'm going to try and make use out of 2 full sheets of sheathing ply. This stuff is 12mm thick, not ideal, it should be thicker, but I'm trying to save any space I can. The sheathing ply, however, is a lot cheaper than your hardwood face ply and especially a lot cheaper than your birch ply. So I'm trying to maximise how much I can get out of these sheets. So after laying down the old template on top, I can then trace around and make any adjustments that I marked out in the van. I just use a permanent marker to trace all the way around the template onto the new ply. However, I have made little marks on the old template to tell me where to add a bit of material and where to take off a bit of material based on the fit. Now I'm adding material in the points where the floor did not meet the walls, and I'm taking away material for things like the carpet coming out 3 or 4mm. And in case you're wondering why I'm on the floor like a peasant when I've got a perfectly good garage workshop, this is why. I can't get in at the minute because of all the old materials that I've taken out of the van. Thankfully, those tool racks have now been sold, recouping me a couple of £100 to put back into the van. With my template drawn out, I'm just using a fine-tooth blade on my jigsaw to cut around the template, leaving a little bit more material than I probably should, just in case anything needs adjusting. And yes, I am cutting this on top of my brand new outdoor dining table that I made. And yes, I did manage to take the corner off it. If I told you that these fit perfect the first time, I would be a filthy liar. They were all very close, but some adjustment was needed. Now you've got to remember the old template didn't actually fit very well to start with, let alone from the change in height from putting the battens on and adding the carpet to certain parts of it, and the fact that I wanted nice profiled footwells and back step parts. All this meant that there was a lot of laying it down, making some marks, dragging it back out, cutting down those marks. It was very time consuming and very difficult. These are the width of the van, so trying to take them in and out of the van was hard work, especially in a place where you can't even stand up. So after a lot of wrestling, blood, sweat and tears, I finally got the fit that I wanted. Now these boards are a little bit bowed, which is the flex that you can see, but they are going to be screwed down, and the back section is going to be made up of the offcuts of these boards. That section is not going to get much foot traffic, so I don't mind it being 2 parts, but I am broken. So the next day I came out and marked out my screw lines. It's difficult to see in this video, but along the back piece of metal below the passenger and driver's seat, I did mark with a permanent marker where the battens fell. I also can see the battens at the back, so it was a case of drawing in a straight line between each point that I've marked. That meant that I've got a line to screw into, and I know I'm going to hit a batten underneath. And this is the drill bit I'm using to drill these holes. Now this is a pretty cool drill bit because not only does it pre-drill a hole for the screw, it also adds the countersink, and the orange part that you saw me twisting allows you to set the depth. So depending on the size of your screw head and depending on the depth of the cut, you can adjust it whichever way you want. Now I'm not going to litter the floor with screws, but I am going to try and put them in plenty of spots. Ideally I would have liked to have had an 18mm sheet of ply for my floor to eliminate any flex. I've tried to save some space, but that means I can eliminate the flex by using some screws instead, I think. and then securing everything in place with some wood screws. Now these screws are 25mm long. That sheet of ply that they're going into is 12mm, and I've actually got 18mm battens underneath. So the screws aren't going to go all the way into the battens, but that way I don't risk then scuffing up the floor underneath. I've filled all of the previous screw holes up. I don't want to be making more if I overdrive one of the screws. After a quick sweep up, it was now time to install the floor. Now I'm going to go for vinyl. Vinyl is cheap and it's easily replaceable. I did think about a laminate flooring, but number one, that adds a lot of weight, and number two, it scratches, as I've found out from having it in my house. And when you're going in and out of a van, usually parked on gravelly driveways, you tend to bring the gravel in. I got the lino online and it only cost about 50 or 60 quid, I think. Delivery was actually nearly as much as the lino itself, but I had a look around a couple of shops near to me and I couldn't find anything I wanted, or they don't sell it in such small amounts. This is just a 2x3 metre sheet, and all I'm doing here is lining it up with the straight side behind the seats. That way I can then run all the overlap up against the wall, try and make sure everything's smoothed out, and start profiling it to the van. If you're going for vinyl for your floor, I suggest you go with the carpeted stuff. It's not that much more expensive, but it has got this carpety, felty back, and it just means that that adhesive does a better job and that it's got a bit more durability to it. It's also quite flexible and fairly easy to work with. Having only done this once before, I am an absolute novice when it comes to laying this stuff. I've found the easiest way is to get yourself into a corner and make some relief cuts, so that way you can get the folds reasonably close. I'm then using a block of plywood that I've sanded the edges on so it's not sharp to press in. That gives you a bit of a fold that you can then run your knife down and get fairly close. The great thing about this van is that everywhere that the vinyl touches, in terms of the sides, is going to be covered by something, whether it's carpet coming down or the walls coming down. This is why I've chose to lay the floor first, because it's going to sit underneath a lot of things. So I don't need to be perfect, I just need to be close-ish. Some parts were easy, like going around the door steps, because you can just run your Stanley knife alongside the wood and it gives a nice clean cut. These corner sections, they were definitely more tricky. You have to do a lot of relief cuts and just kind of sneak up onto it. I got them pretty good, and like I say, it's all going to be hidden anyway, but this is just a kind of peace of mind, do the best you can kind of job. To secure the floor down permanently, I'm just going to use some spray adhesive. This is contact adhesive, which means you spray it on both surfaces that you want to adhere. So you spray it onto the floor and onto the carpeted side of the vinyl, and then you wait for it to tack up. Now it goes through a few stages. When you first spray it, it will be stringy, then it will turn wet, and then it will turn tacky. When you can touch your finger to it and it feels sticky but doesn't come away, that's when it's time to start laying everything down. So I'm going to do this in two halves. Do the front of the van first so that everything's held in place, and then the back of the van. So I'm actually really pleased with the floor. We didn't know whether we'd like the colour or whether it would be too dark, but I'm actually really pleased with it. We wanted to avoid having a wood effect floor, which is really common in vans, because we're actually going to have lots of natural wood around the rest of it. We didn't want it to contrast or end up looking like some kind of sauna. It's all right in most areas. There's some areas that aren't perfect, but I'm not too fussed because everything that you see is going to be covered by either a trim or some kind of furniture, be it a kitchen, a bed, a little closet, or aluminium trim around the doorways. In the next video, I'm going to cover how I installed the solar panel, which is already installed successfully, how I hook that up to the battery and do all of the complicated electrical hub, if you like. It's not the most straightforward thing in the world, so it'll be a bit of a slower paced video. So if you're interested, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.